Okay, so welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday night. As we prepare ourselves for Shabbos up ahead, last week we spent a lot of time really jumping back into things after Pesach, but we've spent many weeks learning about Kiddush and really just learning in a very broad way, not anything more specific, but talking about, and this culminated last week, we spoke about Kiddush as Kiddushin, right? We spoke about a realm of unity, a realm of duality, and wedding the two, marrying those two things. That's what Shabbos is. We spoke about that at length. Here we're going to jump into the first, it's really the second mimer. I'm going to do each and every one. This second essay that Rav Kluger, Rav Kluger Shlita has in Sefer Yichud HaShabbos Volume 1 on the topic of Kiddush. We're going to begin with the second mimer. We'll see how far we get, and we likely won't finish it, so we'll keep it for next week, and we'll continue with that. So let's jump in at the beginning. Take a look at the first paragraph. Kol ha'omer Vayechulu mu'umad. Whoever says Vayechulu, standing up, and we're going to learn the rest of that mimer Chazal. And so he begins. Issa b'harash. He quotes the Rosh in his comments on Psachim, Parak Yud Simin Tasvav, where the Rosh paskins that Kol ha'omer Vayechulu be'erev Shabbos. Whoever says Vayechulu on erev Shabbos, Ke'ilu me'id ala Kodesh Baruch Hu shebara elama b'shisha yamim b'Shabbos b'yom hashvi'i. It's as if he's testifying that God created the world in the 6 days of the week, and he rested on the seventh day. It's eidus. So we spoke a little bit about that last week as well, and that's why we needed two eidim, right? Because when duality is able to come together and testify to one singular thing, that's the wedding between the two eidim, right? Duality, multiplicity, and unity. That's what we spoke about a little bit last week. So there's a concept of eidus. There's a concept of testimony. So what is that all about? Well, Makar Dvarim b'Gemara, the source for this is in the Gemara, where the Gemara tells us, Kalam espalo ba'erev Shabbos vayomer Vayechulu, whoever davens Friday night and says Vayechulu mala alav akasav ki lunasa shutuv la'kadosh baruch hu b'maisa bereshis. It is considered as if this person, or these people, right, the two eidim, so to speak, these two people are in a congregation who are saying Vayechulu together, are partnering with God in the creation of the world. Shenemar, as it says, Vayechulu, al tikri Vayechulu, don't read it, and God finished, Ella Vayichlu. They all finished together, like they finished. They were included in the finishing. They partnered together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in completing the world. And this is paskin in later poskim as well in the Torah. He brings from the Magen Avram and the Taz that this is the concept of eidus, and that's why it needs to be said standing up. And like I mentioned last week, if a person is davening Shemona Esrei longer than the tzibur says Vayechulu, you better find somebody to say Vayechulu with. It has the din of eidus, and we're going to get into that in a much deeper way now. Look at the Kasav HaKolbai and another posik. The Kolbai writes, Yesh b'medrash kol ha'omer Vayechulu mu'umad. Whoever stands up and says Vayechulu standing, Shnei malachi asharis malavan leila adam. Two angels accompany that person, and they put their hands on his head, and they say, V'sar avaynech, or avaynecha, let your sin be removed, v'chatascha techupar, and may your iniquity be completely erased, completely forgiven, completely atoned. But Salaim are meaning to say, Sha'al Shavuas eidus ksiv, with regard to the Shavua that Eidim take, right, that their eidus has the gravity of a Shavua, that they swear that what they're saying has veracity and is true. Im lo yagid, so the pasuk says, well, once they take the Shavua, if they do not say their testimony, so then how could a person have testimony to say, especially in severe cases, chas v'shalom, dina nefashos, dina mamanis, and so on, and not give their eidus? There's a sin that's connected to that. So he's connecting these two midrashim that now that we said that saying Vayechulu is eidus, so then naturally the malachim are going to say that now the kivon sheheidzeh, now that you've said your testimony, eidusai aymer malachi hasharis v'sar avanecha. So now the angels are saying you don't need to worry about that pasuk because you had eidus to say and you said it. Unbelievable. Like, I don't really think about Vayechulu, it's just something we say. And it's like that there's something tremendous going on here. Maybe the whole reason that we came to shul is just for that paragraph. Like if you think of it, I'm not sure that there's, l'chadoidi, there's Chazal's about and so on, but Mariv is Mariv, and sort of Kabbalah Shabbos. But this Vayechulu is a real thing. It's like the centerpiece in a certain sense, not just something we murmur, when the Baal Tefillah finally decides to begin and the Rav finishes. It's what's going on. Vayechulu, eidus. We had testimony to say. If we would have withheld it, there's a sin. And here we said our testimony. We gave eidus. We testified. Unbelievable. And then the angels bless this person. And they say, and he brings her Evagam B'Sholte Gabarim. He's always bringing other sources. I don't know how he knows everything, but he knows everything. So he says, look over there. It's unbelievable what this man has accomplished. Is totally remarkable. I think maybe he has like 25 Sfarim. Like each of them is a thick, huge Rav Kluger.
Is he?
Yeah, he's alive. Rav Avram Tzvi Kluger. My dream is to bring him to London. Dream. One day. Unbelievable person. If there's anybody that I consider, like, you know, my Rebbe is Rav Moshe Weinberger, you know, but like, my neshama is just so aligned with his Torah that the synthesis, nigla, nister, and he has a certain... He's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, so let's see what he does over here. Yakum Adavar, hey, thanks for joining. So he says Vikasha. So he says, okay, fine. So all this is nice. We've learned a couple of midrashim that talk about the concept of eidus, and Vayechulu is saying eidus, and all this is nice and good and well. But he says, let's really think about this for a second. Vikasha, it's difficult. Halabigidre eidus b'shar dini Torah. With regard to all other testimony that the Torah addresses, ha'edim he mamish mekayme hadavar. The edim are the ones that establish that thing. Uklashon Torah. Al pi shnayim edim or shnei edim or shloisha edim yakum davar. If you don't have, you know, today they say if you don't have footage, it didn't happen. It's like the modern idiom of if you don't have witnesses, nothing happened because like you didn't have things recorded, they didn't have testimony. It's actually interesting in halacha, you know, what in terms of like video camera or recordings, like to what extent are those considered testimony? You know, the Torah is telling you it has to be people. People witnessed this thing. And if they didn't, and there's no testimony, we don't know anything about it. Yakum davar. The eidus is creating, we're going to come across this terminology a little bit later on, it creates a chalos, or a chalois. Depends on what background you come from, but it's both the same. It creates a chalos. Something happened here because Edim saw it. So he says, what does that have to do with the creation of the world? The entire world has been created thousands and thousands of years ago. It is totally done and finished and complete. So what is the testimony doing? Like, of what use is it? And what does it accomplish? Okay, he says the Ohr HaChaim asks a similar question in his commentary on Pasuk Gimel rather of the second parak in Bereshis. Al Ikram Amaram, just generally speaking about Chazal's comment, call him a spalo b'ar Shabbos or Vayechulu, like we just learned. Whoever davens Friday night and says Vayechulu malo lavakasav kilu nasa shutav lakadosh baruch hu b'maaseh Bereshis. And the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh asked the same question: what is the place of this testimony? Right? What is it accomplishing? Of what use is it? So he says very deeply. In order to understand this matter, to understand it through the lens of the interiority of Torah and the inner light and the soul of the Torah, so he says first we have to take a look at what testimony is in the revealed portions of Torah, because our Chaver already know that the halacha is the body of Torah, hein gufei halachos, right? Halacha is spoken about in the terminology, used in the terminology or linked to the terminology of a guf, of a body, and Kabbalah, Nister, Chasidus, all the heart-centric limudim are the neshama of Torah. And just like if a person's guf, chas v'shalom, is a person, there's some part of the person's body that for whatever reason isn't functioning properly, and a person loses their hearing or a person's eyesight is taken away, there's a certain aspect of the neshama that can't manifest, right? The neshama is a seeing being, way beyond the physical sense of seeing. The Ramchal speaks very deeply about the power of sight to accomplish way more than the way that we process just vision. Way. It's just that, and the Piasetzner Rebbe says this also, all we've ever put in front of our eyes is physical things. He says, who's to say that your sense of sight can't access higher realms? And Neshama can see things, sees things outside. What about inside? And not physical, obviously, right? But maybe the koach of sight is able to avail a person access to many different realms. very deep. People who do deep meditation for many, many, many years, they can get to certain places where they see visions, they see things in the psyche, opening certain doors in the mind, going in very deep. So if a person doesn't have their, let's say, their physical eyes, there's a part of the neshama that can't come to expression. And it's the same thing in Torah. The more that we understand the nigla of Torah, the more that a person learns halacha, the person understands all the nuances and the details and so on and so forth. Now there's more like shetach, like there's more space, there's a larger vessel for the light of the interior of Torah to suffuse, to become expressed. A lot of us just sort of stop at the body, and then we never do the work of then say, okay, what's the meaning, right? So we learn a lot of halacha, but then we immediately need to stop whenever a person finishes. You learn some Mishnah Berurah, okay, what's the pnimius? What's the inner meaning? What's the soul of it? How is this going to come alive, like a body comes alive when filled with the soul? What is the soul? Where is Hashem in this halacha? Where is depth, meaning, clarity, philosophy, like all of the things that are not, black on white? Like where is that in this halacha? How can I find that? I'm working now on a kuntras, hopefully to put out on Shavuos, and you'll be hearing more about it because I need some funds for printing. Wink, wink. But I have to write it first. And basically, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to have a kuntras with two parts, and the first part is all halacha, and then the second part is going to be okay. Now that we learned the sugya together. Now let's figure out what it actually means, so that any time we'll go back to this sugya halacha, it's the sugya of tmimus, of marav on Shavuos and davening b'ba'idiyayim, but you need 49 complete days, and so there's a big sugya halacha about most congregations push off marav, so that we even though usually we are bringing in Shabbos early, bringing Yantav early, but over here we need the day to last, and etc. It's a fascinating sugya and a very relevant one and a prevalent one. And then okay, so like what's the neshama of that? What's the depth of 50 complete days? Like what's the omek of that? What's the relationship between the last day of Sfira and Shavuos, etc.? I don't want to give it all away, but it's beautiful, mamish beautiful. So that's the nekuda. Says Rav Kluger, so we want to address the depth of this neshama aspect, like what Shabbos really means. So first we have to learn about eidus. And the more that we know about eidus, the more then we're going to be able to go back to the neshama and utilize it to infuse the soul and to bring it to life. So here he takes us very briefly through huge sugyas in halacha, and just from the sources he's going to quote, you see obviously he's just in 4 sentences he's telling us huge concepts. This is what he says. He brings from a number of achronim over here. If you just take a look at the end, Rav Chaim Brisker, he brings from the Ar Sameach, the Meshech Chachma, he brings from different sugyas in Shas al Pi Divrei Rishonim, that the achronim split eidus into 2 different kinds. There are 2 categories of testimony in the Torah. We found 2 kinds of eidus in the Torah. Number 1, yesh eidus al kiddush hachodesh v'dinei nefashos v'dinei mamanis. You have eidim that are there to testify to a reality. So, for example, we need eidim back in the day, at least now the calendar is set, to testify about the new moon. And there's a whole system, and the Mishnah tells us, right, and the mountains and the torches and the whole incredible process of how they would be the first to see and to declare Kazeh Eva Kadesh, like Rashi says on the pasuk HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Hazeh Kazeh Eva Kadesh, a new moon. Witnesses that witness a murder. Chas v'shalom, lahavdil, person, they see something happen. Witnesses that witness someone stealing something, or any dini mamanis or dini nefashos or kiddush hachodesh. This is a kind of testimony that doesn't create a reality. It's a reality that happened, but now that there were witnesses who watched the reality, they are able to report what happened. That's one kind of eidus. And then there's a completely different other kind of eidus, which is v'yesh eidus al gitin v'kedushin. There's the eidus of marriage and lahavdil chas v'shalom, divorce. When a marriage dissolves, both of those things require eidim, and if you don't have eidim, then it doesn't work. You can go through the whole kedushin, but you need eidim to be there. So he says, if you think of it, There's a huge distinction between these two different kinds of eidus. Why? Because the latter form of eidus, gittin and kedushin, like we just spoke out, should be gittin and kedushin ha'edim heim likiyume. Right? They're called in the Gemara eidei kiyum. Right? They are edim that bring about the reality into existence. So they're not witnessing something that happened outside of them. They are part and parcel of bringing the reality into being. Ubishar eduyas, but all of the other eduyim, that's something else. Heim lebirur ha'emes. They are just there to enable a clarification of a truth that existed completely outside of them. Two kinds of eidus. You understand? Right. So the first category is just not involved. It's not involved eidus. Something happened. The eidim are there to be able to report at a later date that the thing happened. And the second kind of eidus are participants. They're participatory. Right? It's only happening because of them, not that they witnessed it happen. They also witnessed it happen, but only because they were part of it. When he says, take a look in these sources if you're interested in seeing more of the technicalities and the distinctions between these two in those sources that were mentioned from Rav Chaim Brisker and the Ar Sameach, and so on. So he says, V'hine eidei birur, edim that are there for the clarification of truth, einam chelik mehanasa. They don't take part in the thing that happens. Ki tachlisam hu liraya, right? Their whole thing is that there should be a proof. Ukalash Gemara, like the Gemara says in Kedushin, for these kind of edus, the only reason we need witnesses is because people lie. If no one lied and nothing was ever called into question, you wouldn't need edim, right, to be able to vouch for the truth, because the truth would have happened and that's it, and people stick to what happened. But if a person's coming out to deny, that this interaction took place, to deny that anything was stolen, to deny that these two people ever met, to deny that, etc., so that in a world where there's sheker, then you need edim in order to correct that. That's the eidus of eidei birur. Dainu, shahamaisa nifal al yedei habale davar legamrei. The thing that happened is a thing that happened, with all the various halachas associated with that, with or without witnesses. It happened. It's there. Veheim, and the whole task of the Eidim is rak mevarerim as hamaisa mibachutz. Their job is to clarify this from an external perspective as two observers. You see how deep this is. I mean, notice a little bit about quantum mechanics. You should immediately start thinking, right, about the particle wave, right, the double slit, right, a little bit, if anybody's familiar. So, right, because the observer sort of changes the reality, right? And when you observe it, the particles act differently. When you observe it, they act like waves. When you look away, they come out like particles. And this is the whole deep thing. Like, how could it be that human consciousness is actually changing reality, and then all of pop psychology and, the law of attraction and everything else, huh?
Schrödinger.
Yeah, Schrödinger's cat, that's right. So unbelievable. All these different experiments. And over here you see that if you learn the sugyas deeply, it's all in the Torah. Two kinds of eidus. There's an eidus that witnesses without impacting, but there is a concept of eidus that actually takes part in forming the reality. It's an incredibly deep thing. Amazing. Okay. Right? That's the first kind of eidus. They're only witnessing this thing from the outside externally. But witnesses that are engaged in the kedushin, in the gittin, they are literally a part of it. They are bricks in the edifice. Without them, it doesn't happen. Without them, nothing occurred. It did not happen. Right? Even if nobody comes afterwards and claims it didn't happen, it doesn't matter. Right? Meaning, even if nobody ever needs that, to prove that this thing happened, and klape shmaya, from Hashem's perspective, this will never be called into question. There will never be. It doesn't matter. It did not happen unless there are eidim. So now he says Vayechulu. Now we have to think about this deeply. Going back to Vayechulu, of us standing testimony, like we said, where it's eidus, so we have to ask ourselves, what kind of eidus is it? Which category does this pseudo, it's like sort of non-halachic eidus, theoretically, which category of eidus does this fit in? Ha'im eidus zu shavayechulu ba'erev Shabbos hu ke'edei birur b'dinei mamanes? Is it that we are standing witness to an act, but the act takes place completely external to us and we're just there to report? Or is it that that without us it actually didn't happen? Begittin v'kedushin. So he says like this. So Levarza is to explain this, and again, like who thinks this way? Like who? It's just such an original thing, And it takes someone with a grounding in both Nigla and Nister, with a heart who really cares about and then to put the two together. It's such a delight to learn like this. It's healthy, body and soul. It's the way it's supposed to be. So he says Levarza, in order to understand this and to explain this, Niftach b'divrei Medrash. Let's open up with the Medrash. And how apropos, right? Obviously, we're coming up to a Shabbos that holds within it the seed of Lag BaOmer already, right? And so, really, over here is the root, because we're preparing for Shabbos, and Shabbos is mamish exactly a week from tonight. Tani Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Amra. So Tani Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Rashbi, the Heilige Rashbi said, Amra Shabbos Lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Such a classic teaching from Rashbi. Shabbos said to Hashem, Ribbon Shalom l'kulam yesh ben zug, v'li ein ben zug. You've given all the days of the week a partner, but I don't have a partner. Because Sunday has Monday, and Tuesday has Wednesday, and Thursday has Friday, and Shabbos is all alone, even though I did see in a sefer, and I can't remember exactly where, or I heard somebody tell me the name of a sefer, and that's really what it is. I didn't see it. He told me, and he doesn't remember which sefer he saw it in, so it doesn't help us anyway, because I did check with him recently, where he said that it isn't actually Sunday to Monday, Tuesday to Wednesday, Thursday to Friday. It's actually 3 and 3, where Sunday has Tuesday, and Sunday has Wednesday, Monday has Thursday, and Tuesday has Friday, and he explained that this is because in the days of creation, the first 3 and the second 3, meaning they parallel, right? So what was created b'koyach, like a certain energy, manifested itself later on. And he says if you understand that relationship, then when Hashem responds to Shabbos, that your Ben Zug is Klal Yisrael, so it's much more intuitive than just like a grouping that's random. Meaning we are here to manifest Shabbos, right? Just like the later days of creation manifested the first, or you can say the other order, because we don't know what manifested who. It could be that Shabbos brings out our greatness, but in either arrangement, that's the depth of that. Yeah.
You said Shabbos is not a day.
True, it's not. But even eternity it gets lonely, very lonely to be infinite and eternal. Very lonely to be infinite. Can you imagine how lonely that is? That's why Hashem created the world. He was so lonely. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad means that God He's all alone. Something that's Echad is all alone. Not fun to be infinite, I imagine.
So just it's one day one is the light, and day 4 is the sun. Which
there you go. Right.
The light, and
yes.
Day 3 is Earth. Day 6 is what lives on Earth. That's like.
All right. So all of these things are mirrored.
It's a logical power. Yeah.
Nachon. And so therefore, again, logically, it makes a lot of sense to put together Shabbos and Klal Yisrael from the standpoint of one revealing, right, or manifesting the potential that was latent in the other, and that's another way of understanding it. Okay, be that as it may. So all of us are. Yeah? Really?
I think he's in the
Beautiful. Thank you. I don't know if we have one here, but I'm gonna try to look it up inside. Okay, now we have a source. Yeshukach. So, but the Chazal we're familiar with. V'li ein ben zug. You haven't given me a partner. Amar le'ah Kodesh Baruch Hu. So Hashem says, Knesset Yisrael hi ben zugech. Klal Yisrael will be your partner. And this also aligns, by the way, Rav Edgar, what you're saying, is that I mentioned that Shabbos is not a day, it's the pre-creation energy. What existed pre-creation? Only Klal Yisrael. B'shvil Yisrael shenikru reishes. Yisrael alu b'machshavat chila. So how beautiful is that? Meaning, just in the same way that pre-creation it was just Klal Yisrael and Shabbos. So when it manifests within creation, Hashem says, no, it's not a day that's alone. You're still with Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is your Ben Zug. It just shows up again now within a creation that's already been created, and flows like that. The Kivin Sha'amdi Yisrael of Ar Sinai Amalham HaKadosh Baruch Hu Zichra Adav Sha'amarti the Shabbos. And when Klal Yisrael stood at Ar Sinai, Hashem told Klal Yisrael, I'm not, threatening you and screaming at you. You better keep Shabbos. Maybe there's a bit of that too, but Hashem takes a completely different approach. He says, just don't let Shabbos down. He says, please remember because I promised Shabbos that I would have company. So please have mercy on Shabbos, because it's not like a choice. Like keep Shabbos, not keep Shabbos. Shabbos is an entity to be protected. We shouldn't be cruel to Shabbos. Shabbos exists. I told you guys already, it was one of the earliest memories that I have of ever feeling anything like emotional with regard to liturgy. And I remember certain train stops along my journey into this world, and I'm just still beginning and still recording all those insights and moments. But I remember when I was fairly young, much younger, as a child, like maybe 7, 8, 9, I was just davening on Shabbos, and in the Shabbos morning Shachris and Birchas Krishma we say V'yoyim hashvi'i mishabeach va'omer mizmor shir liyom haShabbos. Right, on the 7th day, mishabeach va'omer, it begins to praise and sing mizmor shir liyom haShabbos, and it just struck me like the day sings, like the day has character. Shabbos is a thing. It's not Shabbos. It's just we experience time as time, but it's still real. Time exists. Like we said, Hashem created the 6 days. Hashem created Shabbos. Shabbos is a real entity. Shabbos needs to be cared for. Shabbos needs to be protected. Shabbos needs to be kept and guarded. But not like Shabbos, like this set of restrictions that we call Shabbos. The spirit of Shabbos, very gentle, very delicate, just like our souls. And to break Shabbos is to be cruel. It's not an Indian, it's like a completely different category. It's not just bein adam l'makom, God has these ritual rules that you better keep. It's really a ben adam l'chavero thing. It's like a completely different thing. It's
our partner.
It's our partners. Like it's a completely different conception. As Hashem says in Klal Yisrael, He says, "Please zichru hadavar she'amarti l'Shabbos." I give another mashal for this, a very powerful thing. Everybody is struggling today with Shmir Seinayim. That's the world that we live in. With phones in our pockets, and eventually it leads to on the street, and a person gets distracted by different things that a person shouldn't be looking at. For a person who only approaches it from the standpoint of God says that there are certain things that I should look at, and certain things, certain people it helps, certain people it doesn't help. But then, because you ask the same person, will you ever steal something? So I'll never steal. Right? Stealing not, but looking at someone else's fill in the blank, daughter, wife, something that belongs to someone, it's not yours, b'chlal. But that it's like fits into a different category. But what if we put it into that category? Meaning, what if we approach Shmir Seinayim not from the standpoint, for whatever reason, let's say a person really struggles with that part of it, not from the standpoint of like a Shmir Seinayim, not like a Kedusha issue, but what if it was basic ben adam l'chavera? You don't take something that belongs to someone else, you don't look at something that belongs to someone else. It's a Gneva thing. It's not. It's like a totally different approach. Like, what if we could shift our mindset, and it should be as black and white as the same way that hopefully none of us struggle with. I was taking something to go to breaking into someone's house and stealing something. Like, it's the same thing. I can't look at that. Not even because but because that does not belong to me. That's not mine. It's a shift. Same thing we're saying here with Shabbos. Hashem says, Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, listen to the tenderness of the words. You have to listen, and we have to know how to read Chazal. Chazal is like poetry. So Hashem is telling Klal Yisrael, Zichru hadavar she'amarti l'Shabbos. Please remember what I promised Shabbos, Knesset Yisrael hi ben zugech. That Klal Yisrael will be committed to you. Hainu dibor zachar siyam haShabbos kacha. That's what it means when Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, Zachar, remember as yom haShabbos kacha. What's the remembrance? It's the remembrance of what God promised Klal Yisrael. We shouldn't let Shabbos down. Umavur, and it's understood, Shabbos Kodesh Yisod Kedushin ben Klal Yisrael Hashem Yisbarach. Shabbos is all about the bond that we have with Hashem, the Kedushin. We're married to God. Shekain lamdu melekadshay lashon Kedushin. We learn from it like the word Kedushin, like a marriage. You get the Kasav Ramban al Piatar, like the Ramban comments, Vayechulu Yisai. Ki yimshach min hakodesh, because it comes from a transcendent place. Shabbos enables us to tap into our own transcendence. It enables us to rise above the mundanity of the week, to set ourselves apart on a day that's apart. Ata echad v'shimcha echad u'mikam chayisogay echad. Shabbos is a day of transcendence. V'im tavin divrei zeh teida masha amr b'bereishis Rabbi. He quotes from the Ramban still. If you'll understand divrei zeh, my words, then you'll understand what we wrote in Bereshis Rabbah, Lefi she'ein lo ben zug. about the relationship between Shabbos and Klal Yisrael. He says this is what it means that we have a neshama yisera. There's a wedding. There are two entities here. It's not just you on Shabbos. It's you and Shabbos. There's a marriage. There's a wedding. There's a bringing together. People think the nefesh yisera means you have a double portion. It's much more than that. There's a couple inside of you now. That's the neshama yisera, means there are now two. There is now chassan and kala. There is now Jewish neshama and the neshama of Shabbos, which is our nefesh yisera, just like a husband and a wife joined together, v'hayu lebasar echad, and they become one. This is the two neshamos. That's what the Ramban says. Amazing. Vayekadesh yisai, a lashon of kiddushin, marriage, wedding. V'hinei eis hayichud elel Shabbos. It's known that the time of yichud, according to the Mekubalim, is really Friday night. A time of intimacy, husband and wife. Erev Shabbos husha hachnisa l'chuppah. And if that is so, that Shabbos is the marriage, and then there's the aspect of yichud in the night, so then Erev Shabbos is walking to the chuppah. Erev Shabbos, that's what that is, because the whole thing is a wedding. Like the kala comes out all dressed up and adorned to go to the wedding hall and to go to the chuppah from her parents' house. And that's what the whole Lechadoidi is all about. This it's all about a bride. It's all about a groom. It's a great wedding. Like the Torah writes, why we do say on Friday night, Ata Kidashta b'tfilas leil Shabbos. Why is that the terminology that we use? You sanctified Ata Kidashta Yom HaShvi. Keneged Shabbos Bereishis Kamosha Mechiach Mitoichai. That it's alluding to the first Shabbos, the Shabbos of Bereishis. V'hainu mashem muskar sham, what's written over there, tachlis maaseh shamayim va'aretz. That Shabbos is the ultimate purpose of the creation of heaven and earth. Upsuke vayechulu sha'amadubar behem hu lashon kedusha v'yichud. And the psukim that we use, vayechulu, hashamayim va'aretz v'chotz v'mechadu likim v'yivarech likim v'yikadesh oisai. It's a reference to this kedushin. It's a reference to this joining together, this marriage. When we call zayish lahavin, see, he says over here that it's got to be obvious that if you had two different kinds of eidus, and one was an eidus of money, and an eidus of murder, and an eidus of that, and the other was an eidus of kiddushin, even though there's gittin there too, but it's really eidus of kiddushin. Should never be a gittin, right? Should only be kiddushin, let's say. So then, of course, the testimony Friday night is going to be eidei kiddushin, because that's what's happening. Because Friday night is a wedding. So mikol zeyesh lahavin sheha eidus haShabbos uke eidus kiddushin. And what was the difference between one kind of testimony and the other? That the first was passive, that it was just watching something that happened that we were separate to. But eidei kiddushin are the ones that are bringing it about. We are actively bringing it about. And now we could understand that other Chazal that said that you become a shutuf with a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the creation of the world. These two Maimar Chazal are one. The Maimar Chazal that tells us that standing up to say Vayechulu is eidus, because it's eidei kiddushin, is the same as the Maimar Chazal that says that whoever says Vayechulu Friday night partners with God in creation. Because the kind of eidus that we are exhibiting when we say Vayechulu, which is eidei kiddushin, is an eidus that creates the reality and doesn't simply stand back and watch it. That means that creation is incomplete or not even chal. Like it's not chal creation, all the while that Klal Yisrael are not bringing Shabbos in. We're the ones that are inviting Shabbos down into the world. Shabbos doesn't have a vessel without the Jewish soul. The neshama yisera cannot come down unless there's already a neshama that it is an adjunct to, and therefore is called the neshama yisera. But without already there being a neshama, so who's going to keep Shabbos? So we're the ones, Vayechulu, we're inviting the bride, Vayechulu, come Shabbos, enter in, we turn around, and like by a wedding, when the bride starts walking, everybody stands up. If they're not already standing, I saw different minhagim here, but if people are sitting down, the kala walks in, everybody stands up. We turn to the place where the sun is setting, and we say, Shabbos is entering, and we allow it to approach. And in so doing, we become a partner with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in creation, because all the while that Shabbos isn't created, something very important is missing in the world. What does Rashi tell us was missing in the world? The whole creation was complete. One thing was missing. Menucha. Menucha. Tranquility. Says Rashi, Ba Shabbos, Ba Menucha. Which is a bit of a paradox, right? Because, creation was finished, and therefore he rested. But it's not quite. Because, sure, creation was finished, and now there was rest, but only with the rest is creation truly complete. Because now it includes the work and the rest. Kibun Shabbat Shabbos Ba Menucha. And we're the ones who do that. And that means that we are the cherry on top, like we are the final brick. We are it as it relates to completing creation and then sanctifying the whole world for God, which was the intention in the first place, to bring us to the Psukim and Navi that describe a world that's lit up with the consciousness of God, which is all the consciousness of Shabbos, which is a world of Menucha, where nobody works anymore, and certainly where people are not fighting with each other anymore, and there aren't wars, and everybody's just interested in building and not in breaking, and people are kind, and people are humble, and people are together, and people are real and authentic, and that's the world that we're heading to. That's the world that we have to build. Without Klal Yisrael, there's no chance. So the world is shaking until Yom HaShishi, until we stand Friday night and we make Kiddush. And in Vayechulu, we become the Eidei Kiddushin that aren't just like the Eidim that witness something from without, but become part and parcel of the experience. We are creating the experience. Nasa Shutif LaKadosh Baruch Hu in the creation of the world. Be'ez Hashem will pick up in this part of the learning next week. But how wonderful is that? Is that not? Oh my gosh! It's absolutely tremendous. Yeah, question.
How does this sit with the concept that one of the many distinctions between Shabbat and Yom Tov is that Yom Tov is only happens, right? Kaddish Yisrael Hazmanim.
Yeah.
Yom Tov only Rosh Hashanah is only Rosh Hashanah because he made it Rosh Hashanah, whereas Shabbat
Kviya v'kaima. It just is.
Ilu, no humans existed. We all had some mass extinction event.
Yeah.
Like Shabbat will still be Shabbat.
For sure. That's totally true. In that sense, I would say that maybe the relationship between Klal Yisrael and Yom Tov is a parent and a child. And the relationship between Shabbos and Klal Yisrael is a husband and wife. The husband exists without the wife exists without the husband. But the revelation of the marriage that they'll create is only possible when the two are together. Right? That meaning there's a new entity that's only birthed into the world by virtue of their coming together. And so that's, I would say, I'm not sure if he may even make direct reference to that. It's either in this mimer or one of the further mimer, but he points that out. He says, even though Shabbos is Kviya v'kaima, which is true, but ultimately, Klal Yisrael are revealing the light of Shabbos Kodesh. Okay. Ani haben v'ata ha'av sheli שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני